If you're about to retire this year, you do not want to miss this episode. Fellow investors, bonjour! This is Mike Leroux, founder of Dividend Stocks Rocks and passionate investor. You're listening to the Dividend Guy blog podcast where I and my co-host Véronique will help you invest with more conviction so you can enjoy your retirement. Dividend Growth Investors, Mike Leroux here. You're listening to the Dividend Guy podcast. I am with my co-host Véronique today. We are going a bit outside of the investment world. What are we doing today, Vero?
Well, actually, we often see like retirement as the end goal of investing, but actually, it's one of the biggest transitions in someone's life. And since we invest our life, we have to address that. So to make that transition as smooth as possible, you need to prepare. And today, we're walking through 5 critical things you should do before you retire. So whether you're 6 months or maybe even 5 years from retirement, this episode will help you feel confident and also avoid costliness.
Yeah, so when you're about to retire, you're right, Vero. It's probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest financial moment in terms of decisions, because you're going to take some decisions in the first years before you retire or at retirement that you're not going to be able to come back. Imagine that you retire at the age of 60 and then you decide to turn your RSP into a RIF and then you set up your whole plan. It's going to be very hard to undo everything and then come back. Or if you
Right.
decide to take your CPP and OAS at the age of 65 and then the following year just like, oh no, I should have waited. Well, too late. It's gone. That decision has been taken. You have to live with that. And most importantly, you'll have to live with those decisions for 20, 30, maybe 40 years. So when people are saying, oh, I'm running out of time, I'm retired already, or I'm about to retire, I'm like, dude, no, you have probably a third of your life still to live. So, it's on the positive things. There's a lot of things that's going to happen, but you can afford to go through another bear market. In fact, you're going to live more than one. Sorry to tell you that, but you're also going to go through more than one bull market. And those are things that are going to have a huge impact on the way you live your retirement. So today we're going to try to bring some framework because unfortunately, for all of the questions that we'll discuss today, the answer will always be, it depends. So the key point, I know it sucks, but and that's the thing, it's kind of funny, but every single time, and I remember that I did a plan for a client several years ago, and then he came back to me next week and he was super excited about his plan. But he's like, Mike, I get everything that we did together. It's working. And I see that it's all the tax optimization, everything is on par. But I chatted with one of my friend at work and he's doing completely the opposite that I do. And he was all puzzled by this. And then we started looking into his friend's situation. And after 2, 3 questions, I'm just yeah, it's completely the opposite. One had a huge pension plan, the other one didn't. On the other side had a lot of RSPs, the other one didn't. So already making those decisions about CPP, OAS, how you withdraw your money and all of those stuff, completely different. But they were still at that time, they thought they were in a similar place because they were coworkers having a similar job. So they thought their financial structure was identical or very similar, which was definitely not the case. So we're going to bring you some frameworks today so you can understand how to make the best decision for your case.
All right, so let's start with pretty much the foundation of the plan, which is the budget. What numbers should people gather before building their retirement budget, and how should they organize this?
It's very funny from a previous banker and financial planner to say, but I'm not a fan of budgets.
I knew you would say that.
It's kind of ironic because at the same time, I'm going to tell you it is the basis of all personal finance advice and it's a sound advice. You should do a budget, but I just hate doing them. And I prefer to focus on growth and increasing my income. But when you get to retirement, that's not really possible. You can optimize, but it's over. You should stop working. So the point is not, oh, keep on working so you don't have to worry about your budget. So the idea is more to know how much you're spending. And as you get closer to retirement, this reality is going to be clearer. So of course, if you're in your 30s and 40s right now, you're listening to this, there's no point about making a budget for you at retirement. You will have absolutely no clue what it's going to look like. But if you are a year away or 2 years away from retirement, well, chances are you're not supporting your children as you used to. Maybe your house is paid, so you have like different interests as well, different hobbies. So it's more to see how you envision your retirement lifestyle. Funny enough, it could be lower than when you work, but it could also be higher depending on the type of hobbies or the type of things. I mean, if you want to go on like 3 5 stars cruises per year, probably it's going to cost a lot more than when you go to work every day, right? So
Hmm.
you have to envision the retirement lifestyle. A good trick that I intend to do as well is to look at my credit card statement for a year, for the past like 12 months, just to see where my money's going. And since I pay everything on my credit card and I pay it at the end of the month to get the points, it's really easy for me to just download the statement in Excel and then see. And they're already classified, so you can play around a little bit with the cells, but you're going to have a very good idea that your spouse is spending way too much in clothing or like to have their hair made. I don't know, just saying.
Don't know why you mentioned that.
I'm joking, but the point is more to see like where your money is going. Because I don't
Hmm.
know, for me, calculating down, like tracking down my groceries expenses or whatever expenses is just going to feel so daunting. And I don't
Hmm.
want, like, boring. I don't want to do that. But I'm willing to download 12 months into an Excel spreadsheet and make the calculation. That is good enough for me to know how much roughly I'm going to spend. Anyway, you're going to adjust your budget every single year. The point here is more to have a global idea, because there's a big difference between planning for a retirement that costs $50,000 a year, $20,000 a year, or 100. So at least you need a global number to start working on.
Okay, so once they have like a draft budget, what are the most common like surprise expenses people should plan for?
So, in theory, they should not completely destroy your retirement plan, but it also feels good to have them include in it. So, you can think of house maintenance. So, classic like replacing windows or roofing, helping children down the road. So, if you know that you want to help them getting married or buying a house or paying for your grandchildren tuition, you can already start thinking, okay, so it's going to cost like $5,000, $10,000 at 1 year. So, you can put that aside on specific dates. At that point, the data are not that important. If you know it's going to happen in the next like 5 to 10 years, you just select one date in your projection and it's going to be fine. The point is just to say, oh, I can afford to pay for my roof, pay for my children's wedding, for example. And then the last one I would say to consider is how much you want to spend on healthcare as you grow older. And of course, it's really hard to figure out how much it's going to cost. Planning to sell the house to compensate of some of those costs is also a good solution. But just to think about how much it costs to be in a senior home that has all the services you would like to have, then it gives you also an idea of like, is it really something I want to spend money on or not? I mean, those are all
Hmm.
personal choices, obviously. So it really depends on A, can you afford it? And B, is it important for me? For some people, it will be more important than others because it's going to be a great fear. So it's more about identifying where you want to put extra money. I mean, even for a car, for example, it's going to be part of those kind of not surprise expenses, but almost in sense where if you have your car, it's paid off right now. Well, it's not going to last the next 25 years. We wish, but definitely not in Quebec anyway with the snow and the rust. Not going to happen for 25 years for sure. So you have to manage this as well.
And Mike, is it also a good thing to maybe have like some kind of an emergency fund or something like that? Because I feel like it could change a lot from a year to another too, right?
Well, in terms of emergency funds, it's an interesting question. You probably have a lot less responsibilities once you retire. You know, when we talk about having your emergency funds when you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, it's more like, oh, what about you lose your job? You won't be able to pay your mortgage. But as a retiree, you don't have a job to lose. And hopefully, you don't have a mortgage to pay. Even if you do have a mortgage, you depend on your portfolio and on pensions and government benefits to pay your retirement lifestyle. So at this point, I would go with the cash wedge. We're going to talk about it later on today, anyways,
Mhm.
but I would go with the cash wedge in the portfolio side, but I would not have another like $25,000 lying around in a high interest rate savings account. And I get that we love to have cushions everywhere, but I mean, the more cushions you have, the less returns you make. So at one point, it's going to hurt your returns. Therefore, it's going to hurt your retirement budget. So there's a line to draw here where you can sleep well at night and have a decent amount in cash. But on the other side, mathematically speaking, too much money on the side just in cash is also an opportunity cost that you're leaving on the table.
Right. So, Mike, what's the place of fun in the budget? Like, what's the best way not to forget any, or is this maybe too detailed yet?
It should be at the center of it, right? I mean, you work so hard for your retirement. If you're not able to enjoy it, what's the point? So, what I
Mhm.
like to do for the budget at retirement is having like that global regular lifestyle, and then you can add extras. So, for example, I know that I'll use at least $10,000 for traveling for until I'm like 75, maybe even 80, depending if I'm still in good health. But it's going to be on top of my regular budget. The idea of like adding those fun extra expenses on top of your regular budget is also a good way to have kind of like a cushion where if you have a really bad year on the market, or if you have what you were asking about, like emergency fund, you just like you thought that the roof should be done, but then it's not just the roof, it's the foundation. So you're like,
Mhm.
oh my God, there's an additional like $30,000 that I never thought I had to spend on. Well, then you can skip on the fund for that specific year, but the rest of your retirement plan still holds. So it helps you to be more agile in your budget so you can cut on
Mhm.
extra expenses instead of saying, oh, I'm going to spend $50,000 per year and that's going to include everything. Well, then you will always have the feeling that you're cutting on something. So instead, you can have that base at 40 and then you add another 10 or whatever the number are. That's not really important. And the other thing I would add here, and that's really personal, but I really like the die with zero philosophy where I
Mhm.
want to use my money while I'm living. So if it's for giving to my children to help them buy a house, well, it's going to be a lot more useful when they are in their 20s instead of like having them waiting until I pass away and they're 65 to buy their first house with their cash down. I'm going to give that to them at that point. It's a bit extremist here, but it's pretty much the point here is to create those dividend memories. I just love that from the Bill Perkins book, Die with Zero. He's talking about dividend memories, and I'm a dividend
Mhm.
investor. So I'm like, yeah, there you go. Here's the return on my retirement is to still
Right.
go on dividends. It's just a different types of dividends. So budgeting that you're going to deplete a good part of your portfolio is a difficult exercise. And of course, I suggest that you do that with great caution and have a caution at the end. So don't necessarily plan to exactly die with zero, because if you plan to dying at the age of 86 and you live until 92, the last 6 years are going to be quite painful. And there's no perfect answer here. It's really just to adjust along the way. But I would always spend money now over saving it for later, thinking that I want to create those dividend memories though.
Right. So now let's move to the income part. Like we have mentioned the cash reserve already, and we have like mentioned that on the show before too. But how much cash reserve should retirees aim for before they leave their job? And what's the best way to build it while you're still working?
The biggest fear most retirees have is lack of income at retirement or to see their portfolio deplete too fast. So they're thinking, oh, I don't want to touch my capital. I just want to live off my income, which seems amazing in theory. But first, yes, you're not going to touch your capital, but then you're going to die with like $1 million, $2 million in your bank account, and you would not have benefit from it first. And second, you can plan those withdrawals without having to sell shares at a bad timing by simply having this cash reserve. I mean, it's the simplest way to approach income at retirement is to create your own and just say, okay, I'm going to have my portfolio invested in whatever strategy that I like, that I believe in, so I can sleep well at night. And I have this cash reserve. Now, how you can bridge that gap between how much you generate from your portfolio versus how much you need to withdraw, this is how you create the cash reserve. So let's say, imagine that you generate $34,000 a year, but you need 50 from your portfolio. So your gap is 16,000. So to bridge that gap, you need a cash reserve. I suggest 3 years, mostly because with 3 years of cash reserve, you're going to go through all the regular bear markets because the bear markets in general will take 18 to 24 months to fully recover. So if you have for 3 years and you're at the beginning of 22, for example, well, then you just withdraw money from your cash reserve and you just get the dividend or the distribution that your portfolio generates, but you don't sell any shares. Your portfolio is going down in 22, it's going back up in 23. And still a year and a half later, at the middle of like 23 or towards the end of 23, you're fully recovered and you haven't single share and your cash reserve is still good until 25. So this is how you can go through. Of course, you could have like more, unfortunately. It could be like a worst case scenario where you have financial crisis like 2008 or the tech bubble that lasts 4 to 5 years, but those are rare. And on the other side, you'll cover the most important part of the crisis with the first 3 years. So you're already going to be on your way back up to start selling some shares at this point. But that would be really the biggest problem. Now, how
Hmm.
you can build it is relatively easy, actually. What I suggest is, as you know, your retirement date or roughly which year you're going to retire, you can let your dividends start to pile up. So you stop dripping altogether. You grow your cash this way. And then the other thing that you can do as well is to start rebalancing and trimming your portfolio. So by trimming a little bit here and a little bit there, so you can get to that cash reserve before day one of your retirement. So you don't have to do a massive transaction. That can be done. If you are able to do it over 2, 3 years, it's even better, but that can be done over 12 months in an easy way this way.
And now the big question is, because we hear that all the time, where to park this cash, Mike? Like, is it savings accounts, GICs? Like, what's the best setup?
It puzzles me to be like a huge question. It keeps coming back all the time. Like, where should I park cash? Where should
I know.
and when you like drill it down to the answer, I mean, technically, if you hesitate between a high interest rate savings account or a GIC ladder for 3 years or some short bonds ETFs, chances are the difference in terms of return will be about 0.5% at maximum. On $100,000 cash reserve, that's $500 a year. I mean, yes, it's money, but it's not going to move the needle that much. And we're talking about on
Mm.
$100,000. So if your cash reserve is like 30 grand and the difference like 0.2, we're talking about $60. It's not even enough to go to the restaurant with two people. I mean, it barely
Mhm.
pays for the wine actually. So it's not going to change anything in your life. So the point here is to find an easy way, a safe way to park your cash that gives you some percentage of interest. You want something liquid, you want something that will not move into value. So you have plenty of those cash ETFs that will do the job. GICs, if you don't trust ETFs, that's fine, but they're less flexible. So you want to have money available every year. But that's pretty much it. I would not spend too much time on that. A quick overview of like the best high interest rate savings account and then cash ETFs. You look at them, they're all liquid, they're usually super safe. You pick one and off you go. So that keep it simple. It's not the place where you should put that much time into your retirement plan.
All right, but now concretely, like, what steps should someone take before retiring to set up their portfolio for moving from accumulation to decumulation?
So the two things are just based on the cash reserve. I mean, unless you want to change your strategy, that could be something that you may think of, but you don't have to. You don't have to change your strategy because you retire. And I keep hearing that, oh, I'm about to retire. I need to change my strategy because we've been told the older you get, the more fixed income and or the safer your portfolio should
Mhm.
become. Which, yes, it's interesting because you may feel that you fear a little bit more the market crash. But if you have a solid plan and you have a cash reserve, there's absolutely no reason to fear from a market crash. You already know it's going to happen. It's not a matter of like if, it's a matter of when. So if you're
Mhm.
already prepared, it's like being scared of it's going to rain outside. Well, tough luck, my friend. It's going to rain one day. And the only thing that you can do is to have sure that you have your umbrella ready or your water boots. That's pretty much it. I mean, and whenever it's going to rain, you're going to go outside and you're going to be prepared for that because it's going to happen. You know it's going to happen. So instead of changing your portfolio strategy, I would say go for something that you understand and you're comfortable with. So if you've been successful with your strategy over the past 25 years, why fixing something is not broken? For me, it doesn't make
Mhm.
any sense. So like for example, I've been a dividend growth investor for the past 15 years. I intend to keep it that way until I die or until I cannot manage my portfolio anymore. But that's pretty much the only two reasons why I would change my strategy. And then I will just add that cash reserve to ensure that I have discussion if the market goes down. So that's as simply as that. I'm in control. I decide everything around my portfolio and my source of income by this way. So, as I mentioned earlier, a couple of years before retirement, you stop dripping. So, you build your cash reserve naturally. And there are like 5 steps, 5 easy steps you can do to clean your portfolio. Because, I mean, cleaning your portfolio, what does that mean, anyways, right? So, first thing is to clarify how many holdings you want to keep. So, you look at an ideal number of stocks. Let's say it's like 30 stocks. Well, then an ideal position would be like a 3-ish% to have an equal weighted portfolio. And based on that target position, you're going to move on to step number 2, which is looking at your smallest investments. All those that are like 0.2%, 0.5%, even 1%. If your target is like 3, why do you keep a stock at 1%? That doesn't make much sense. So you either decide you crank it up to 3% or you get rid of it. So already you're going to start cleaning up your portfolio this way. Then the third level is to look at your duplicates. You've heard me saying that over and over again, but I don't want to have 7 different types of salt in my soup. I don't want to have 7 Canadian banks in my portfolio either because it's completely useless. I might as well select my favorite 2 and I'll be good. So by cutting down the duplicates, again, you sell some shares, you clean up your portfolio, make it cleaner, simpler, easier to manage moving forward. Step number 4, you look at your losers. Why? Well, just to make sure that they're still relevant in your portfolio. Some of them will, and that's totally fine. I'm a big fan of being patient, so I'm not selling a stock because the price movement is up or down. But if I have a losing stock in my portfolio, I might want to learn the cause of that. Like what's happening? So maybe the metrics are going down, maybe the investment thesis I had is not relevant anymore. The company is losing market shares, the revenues are going down, the earnings are going down. Well, then maybe I will get to the point where I do not want to have this loser in my portfolio anymore because the financial metrics, not the stock performance, dictates that it's not going to get better anytime soon. So another way to clean that portfolio, get rid of some of those losers. Same thing for winners. That's number 5. So especially at retirement, you made great investment decisions. You made a fortune on buying Tesla. Now it's like 50% of your portfolio. You might want to get into a little bit more diversification because now it's the time to start selling and withdrawing money from your portfolio. And maybe if Tesla goes bad, it could completely destroy your portfolio. So you might want to trim a little bit more your winners just to make sure you're not overexposed to a single stock. So by doing those 5 small steps, you're going to have a cleaner portfolio. And if you're on in ETFs, that's even easier. I mean, you can narrow it down to like literally one ETF that is like a broad ETF, like an all-in-one that covers everything. Or you can create your own homemade all-in-one ETF. It's going to come down to the same thing. You're going to have like 4 or 5 ETFs. And then while it's easy, you don't have to sell an ETF to clean up your portfolio. You just have to trim equally weighted to respect the percentage that you wanted in the first place. So that should happen pretty much every year. If you do not have an all-in-one ETF and you're making your own, well, year over year, you want to rebalance this because if you wanted to have 45% exposure to the US market and now you're at 75, well, it's good timing to start trimming. So again, you trim, you clean, and you're good. And if you have an all-in-one ETF, well, you just sell a few shares and then boom, you have your cash reserve ready.
Hey, dividend growth investors, this is Vero. Mike is currently taking a sip of water, which gives us 10 seconds, and I literally mean 10 seconds to grow the podcast together. Go on Spotify or Apple Podcast, hit pause, and then under our logo, you'll see 2 very interesting buttons. One to subscribe, hit that subscribe button now, and then give us a 5-star rating. You know, our goal is to help more investors just like you, so please spread the love. Thank you.
Okay, but Mike, talking about ETFs and strategy, like what would you say to investors thinking about moving from dividend growth investing to ETF investing at retirement because maybe they have less time or less interest or whatever reason?
Well, the point is, if you do it because you do not want to monitor stocks anymore, or you find it overwhelming and or it stresses you out, well, it's a good thing to go with ETFs. But if you go with ETF, that also means you let the control go. And by letting the control go, I also mean you stop listening to the financial news, because there's no point of listening to the financial news if you have a broad index wise portfolio. Now, if you want to start picking your ETFs and rebalancing and buying and selling ETFs every month, well, you're going to run into the same problems as stocks. So it's not better, it's not worse. But if managing your portfolio quarterly was overwhelming, well, if you give the same attention to the market and to news and you're always trading your ETF, you haven't solved your problem in the first place. So just make sure that you do that for the right reason. And most importantly, not because one strategy did well over the past 3 years and not your portfolio. That's not a good excuse, because you have no clue if it's going to be the same thing in the next 3 years. And actually, if you start doing that, you're always going to look backwards and change your strategy every 3 5 years. And that's a perfect recipe for never benefiting from the power of compounding interest into staying invested in a single strategy.
And just like quick note, listeners, like people at TSR, Dividend Stocks Rock, some of them, of course, are retired. And what we hear from them is because they manage their portfolio is that it keeps them in shape mentally. Like they really enjoy doing that. And they, like you've said, I mean, it's a quarterly review. It's not that long either. So just consider that also, maybe. So, Mike, for those planning to create their own dividend, like what should they put in place before the first withdrawal?
Yeah, so I want to stop here for a second. Creating your own dividend. How about like going even wider? Create your income. And why at retirement you should focus on being the one creating your income? Well, first, it's simple, super simple. We're going to talk about it. It's flexible and you have control. So we have already discussed of having an agile budget. Why don't you
Mhm.
have an agile portfolio? Why would you pay fees in form of management fees or fees to an advisor? But it's even worse if you're buying ETFs or mutual funds that are promising you like distributions, you're paying a fee for that. Well, you can do it yourself, because I mean, the guys selling you the ETF, like the ETF itself or the mutual fund, they're not doing anything like completely out of whack. They're not creating money out of thin air. They're actually investing in a specific strategy, doing the work, and then generating total returns. And from that total returns, they issue a distribution. Well,
Mhm.
you can actually do all of this with your portfolio and not pay a single dollar. And it's not that hard to do. I mean, if you invest $100,000 in an ETF and you get $10,000 a year in distribution, you can do exactly the same thing with a portfolio. And that could be like invested in an ETF like XQT, for example, for $100,000
Mhm.
with a cash reserve. When the market is up, you sell some ETF shares. And when the market is down, you take the cash reserve, and then boom, you get your $10,000. So and it's not going to be better or worse than the ETF or the mutual fund selling you that strategy, because it's all about generating enough total return. So if the ETF does not generate for 10% of total return, if they give you that distribution of 10%, the ETF funds will lose value. The same way your portfolio, if I invested all my investments in dividend stocks and my portfolio goes from $100,000 to 105 and I withdraw 10K, well, my portfolio's value is going to be 95. I mean, there's no magic here. It's just pure math. You cannot invent distributions. Like the distribution has to come from somewhere. Either it's profit from the strategy, either it's from selling assets. I mean,
Mhm.
there's not another way. So you can create your own income regardless of the strategy. Of course, it's easier if you're a dividend gold investor because you already have like a part of that income being created naturally, but it comes down to the same thing. If you're making the bad decisions and you invest in stocks that cut their dividend, here goes your distribution and dividend income. That's going to go down also. So
Mhm.
the first thing that you should do when you want to create your income is to do some tax optimization. Assuming you have your portfolio and strategy straight up, now it's time to see, okay, which portfolio is going to start paying first? Because at retirement, classic, you're going to have like 5, 6, 7 different types of accounts. So non-registered, registered, including the TFSA, maybe a pension plan that is now a LIRA. You're going to have RSP. Maybe you're going to have your spouse RSP or a spousal RSP and so on. So you're going to have like plenty of accounts. Yeah, it sounds a lot of fun, right? For those listeners, I know we're recording a podcast, but we always do it with the camera. So I see Vero's face and she's like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. Like, I really don't feel like looking at all my accounts. But there's a good news. There are like financial projection tools that are going to tell you that, or you can pay someone to do it, or a retirement coach can do it as well for you. But this is super important because then you know which portfolio is going to be prepared to pay right now. And some others, let's say in your planning, you're not going to touch your TFSA until the age of 75 or 80. Well, then your TFSA can be invested 100% in the same strategy without having a cash reserve. You don't need that account. So you just prepare the one that you need to withdraw from, and then you create the cash reserve, plus you have the rest in your portfolio. And then every quarter, every year, you withdraw the money. And there you go. You create your own income. You're in full control, and it's a lot cheaper. Like ETFs are not going to do better than you. You can just copy their strategy if you want to copy them as well. So that's also a possibility.
For Canadians, Mike, CPP and OAS are significant parts of their retirement. What documents or details do people need to make a smart decision about when to take CPP and OAS?
Yeah, so for our American listeners, you have like the same kind of like government benefits as well as like government pension. We can put it all of them into the same basket because it's about the same thing. The first thing you need to know is to reach out for the government services to get your numbers straight so you can actually work on real numbers. They're going to be approximate. The further you are from retirement, the more approximate they're going to be. But if you're like going to retire next year, it's pretty precise. So that's good. And then you go into a financial projection software or a spreadsheet and you start making some calculations. What I would suggest for Canadian investors is to read the book Retirement Income for Life by Frederick Vitis. Explains a lot of key component about CPP and OAS, and the fact that it's amazing because if you are able, and technically that's the best way to do it, postpone CPP and OAS as long as you can for two reasons. The first one, you're getting a bonus for each year you postpone after 65, so you're getting more money. And the second reason is guaranteed income. So if you're able to get to the point that you can start withdrawing it at the age of 70, well, you get the maximum potential government benefits. And on top of that, it's guaranteed income forever. So you don't have to worry about that part anymore. So the weight of having your portfolio being invested in the market, you managing that portfolio, creating the income, all of that is taken off your shoulders and it's being taken care by the government. I will always put a quick note though that yes, mathematically speaking, the best moment to take CPP and OAS is the age of 70. Most of the time, the sweet spot is a little bit more around 67 and 68. The reason is quite simple. I mean, if you wait until the age of 70 and you pass away at the age of 72, you did not get much government benefits. Of course, that's a bit of an extreme situation, but it's just to highlight it. If you pass the age of 85, but you took it around the age of 67, 68, you're still a winner until the age of 85. So that's why it's more aligned with your life expectancy. But of course, if you live until the age of 112 years old, 70 was the best moment to take it. So you have a better idea, but having the financial projection, what is great is you're going to see what's the cost of taking it at 67 versus 68 versus 70. And then once you can put a dollar amount to that decision, it's going to be a lot easier because I've done that like 100 times, more than 100 times actually. And for some clients, it's just like, oh, it's better, but we're talking about $800 a year. Well, $800 if you're on a $25,000 budget, it's a lot of money. If you're on a $70,000 budget, probably not going to move the needle that much. So then you can take it whenever you feel like, because retiring is also about taking away as much stress as possible. So if you really want to take it at the age of 65 at this point, and it's not going to move the needle into your retirement lifestyle, even though it's not the most optimal way to do it in terms of numbers, it may be the most optimal way to do it in terms of emotional response to your retirement.
Right. So, Mike, before the first riff withdrawal, what are some tax saving moves retirees can make, like especially in that crucial 5 year window before 71?
Yeah, so if you wait past 71, well, it turns out into a RIF, and then there's a minimum amount that you're forced to
Hmm.
withdraw every year. So you're game over in terms of decisions. It's not bad, but I mean, you can't do anything else. So before that, what is great is to figure out if it's better, again, running projections. I mean, you're not going
Hmm.
to find this answer without that. But if you have a lower source of income before that, so you can withdraw a little bit more from your RSPs before converting into a RIF at the age of 71. And there's also the advantage of converting it earlier so you can benefit from the tax credit. And also, depending on your spouse age, that could also be another factor that you want to consider. So the point is really to see how much RSP you have. Because if you have like $1 million in your RSP and you wait until the age of 71 and you just withdraw the minimum, what's going to happen is the common expression is the time tax bomb. So if you pass away and your spouse pass away and you both have like $1 million each in your RSP, well, half of it is going to go to the government before it touches your children or your estate. So that's not exactly a good way to do that. Maybe you want to start retiring earlier and then start dipping into your RSPs first. And this is also a good case where you can withdraw money from your RSPs into a RIF before the age of 71 and then wait until the age of 70 to get your government benefits so you can smoother the taxes altogether. So it's usually the best way to approach that is to make sure that your marginal tax rate and your average tax rate is about the same throughout your entire retirement. Whenever you have peak of taxes, you probably can optimize this part to lower
Hmm.
the tax on that specific year and make it as even as possible. This is the best way to do tax optimization. But then the mechanics to do that is a case by case basis, and you need to run projections to know about that.
And I just can't help mentioning because we keep on talking about financial projections, but in case you didn't know, we have Retirement Loop, which is a Canadian community for people transitioning to retirement. And we have a financial projection sheet
Did we?
for our
Oh,
members.
how
Yeah, we do
convenient.
so. And we also have like a retirement coach to help you out and review it with you. So I'm just saying that, by the way. So retirementloop.ca/waitlist if you want to know more. So, Mike, so far we have mostly talked about numbers, right? But one crucial thing not to underestimate is purpose. I did an entire episode with our retirement loops coach last week, Mark Young, about this topic. And by the way, I will put the link in the show notes, the Dividend Guy blog /251. But in your view, Mike, why is it so important to plan like a daily routine and personal goals before retirement starts? And how can people get started if they're unsure?
First thing, I'm actually doing this right now, and I'm not even about to retire. But and I'm gonna sound like a cheerleader here, but Bill Perkins again from Die with Zero. I mean, this guy's gonna send me a check by the end of this episode for sure. Jokes aside, he talks about because we all talk about the bucket list. So all the
Hmm.
things that you want to do at retirement or before you die, and it's a very interesting approach. But what he adds to that is a time bucket list in a sense where at different seasons of your life, you're going to be able to do things that you're not going to be able again. A very good example of that is the fact that I went to Peru this summer with my family and we did the Inca Trail. For me, doing the Inca Trail, reaching Machu Picchu was already part of my bucket list. But what's even more important for me is to be able to do that with my 3 children on top of doing it with my wife. So I could
Hmm.
have done it with my wife at the age of 60 without any problems. I mean, actually, we actually hiked with a nice group of Canadians that were in their late 50s, beginning of 60s. They were amazing, and they did it without any problems. So you can still do it, but at the age of 60, it's going to be completely impossible to do that with my 3 children. So in
Right.
terms of like, yes, it's a bucket list, but it's also a time bucket list and for me to do it this way. So as you go into retirement, just think about what you can do at the age of 75 versus what you can do at the age of 55 or 60. And some things are going to be quite obvious. If your dream is to do bungee in New Zealand, probably you should not wait until you're 75 to do that. Maybe you want to do it a little bit younger, but I'm just saying, So trying to already identify things that you would like to achieve at a younger age that will not be possible down the road, that is already something interesting. So trying to separate the seasons of your life as you get into retirement. Then, yes, it's great to have those big items on your list, but you also need kind of like almost day to day or new long term projects. You cannot just say, oh, I'm
Mhm.
going to like hike the Kilimanjaro and then hike the Inca Trail. Then I mean, at one point, you're not going to hike every single month, right? Or you're going to grow
Right.
tired, or your knees are going to say no more. So you need
Mhm.
stuff as well to complete your daily routine. So it's either like having a dog and going to the park every day. If you're a fan of like going to the theater or going to see shows or sports events or whatever you like, but try to find ways that are going to be included in your weekly routine. Because if you don't do that, it's going to be dull and it's going to be very long. In terms of
Mhm.
sense of purpose, it's kind of ironic because when I come back from any soccer practice, I cannot just stop talking about those kids. Like I keep, and not just my son, I really talk about all the kids. Jose, my wife, knows everything about all kids, all the soccer players in Granby. It's kind of funny. And at one point, she's like, just like, okay, can you stop? Like, okay, you've talked enough about that. So maybe as a retiree, I will continue coaching, but not even my sons or my grandsons at this point, but just a bunch of kids because I just love doing that. And I'm going to feel useful doing it. And I'll have even more time to plan my practices. So it's going to be just crazy. But
Right.
just to show you when you're able to identify those kind of projects or just like, yeah, I want to read more books or I want to like be part of a club and start social dancing or I don't know, I'm just like throwing out ideas, but trying to find ways to keep connected. I mean, I love running. Maybe at that time I will be in a better position to say, you know what, it's going to be fun to run with other people. I'm going to join a running club, and
Mhm.
definitely for older people, because if I run with people in their 20s, they're going to kill me. But again, season your life, right? So you go along with what you want. But having those items and trying to figure them out before you retire, because it happened to me a lot of times as a financial planner where I helped a lot of people transition into retirement. That was my job. And several times they were coming back to my office 6, 9 months after retirement and they were just like, Mike, I'm bored to death. I cannot
Mhm.
do anything. I've completed all the small stuff. I did the big trip I wanted to do, and then the next year is going to be another. But in the meantime, I have nothing else to do. And they're
And it's sad.
freaking out. It is sad. It is
Yeah.
sad. So it's important to have this kind of like list of activities and interest that maybe you did not have that much time in your 30s, 40s, 50s, but now you have all the time in the world. Well, it's time to get moving and find those interests and activities for sure.
Right. I know I'm gonna spend a lot of time at the barn.
Oh, really?
Mike,
I'm surprised.
that's part of my
actually,
plan. I'm
actually,
not sure about
you
Mark's, but
may even buy one and just like enjoy it, right? So
then I'm gonna destroy the retirement plan altogether. But anyways. So Mike, talking about what pre-retirement conversations should people have with their spouse or family to align on purpose and
oh,
lifestyle?
that's a very good one, especially if you plan to buy a barn, maybe you want to run that by your husband first and then try to
Mhm.
find some compromises, right? We laugh, but it's I think it's super important because, as you grow older, you're going to evolve. Your tastes are going to change and your vision of retirement may be very clear for you, not as much for your spouse. It could be completely different. And then if you don't talk
Mhm.
about it, well, you're going to be surprised. My wife and I keeps on talking about what we're going to do just when the childrens are going to leave the house. So we're not talking about retirement yet, but we're still trying to figure out what's the vision once the house is empty. And instead of
Right.
waiting until it's happening, we're trying to find like what will be our ideal life at this point. So I'm still going to work, that's for sure, but I would like probably to spend like a 2, 3, maybe 4 months offshore, especially during winter time, knowing my love for winter. But then, I mean, that's me. I need to run that by my spouse. I mean, maybe she has
Mm.
absolutely no interest of living abroad for 4 months. Maybe she thinks it's way too much. So those are the things that you need to discuss, and even right before, are you both ready to retire at the same time? Because that is
Mm.
also something sometimes I see with people. It's like one hates his job, wants to retire right away. The other one loves her job, and then they want to keep working for the next 5 years. So how are you going to manage those 5 years where one is just sleeping in, not doing much and enjoying life, and the other one is like waking up at 6 and then going to work. It could create some friction at one
Right.
point. You have to be a bit
Right.
careful about that. So just having an open discussion about when do you want to retire, what do you want to do there, what's your vision, and then start. The more you talk about it, the more you're going to come with a common vision, and it's going to be clearer for both parties, which is going to be even easier. So, but yeah,
Mhm.
it has to be prepared first, because if not, it's going to be a big surprise.
And it's funny that you mentioned that because, like, just a couple of weeks ago, my husband said, maybe I'm gonna like pre-retire, like at that age or whatever. And I was like, I'm not gonna be retired at that age, and I'm not gonna like to work with you in the house because if you don't know my husband, like he's loud, he's really loud. He talks loud, makes a lot of sound. I can tell you what he's doing and where he's doing it just by the sounds he makes. So anyway, like that's not gonna happen. But that's the kind of discussion you must have with your spouse, that's for sure. All right. So in summary, listeners, here are the five crucial things to prepare for before the big day, which is your retirement, is know your budget, build your cash reserve, plan how you will generate income with a financial projections, get your details about CPP and OAS, and of course, imagine what your typical day, week, month, and year will look like. So, Mike, for someone who wants help checking all these boxes before they retire, how does Retirement Loop guide that transition again?
Yeah, so we are going to reopen our doors, because the thing with Retirement Loop is you cannot subscribe right away. Right now, it's impossible. It's completely closed. We open the doors about twice a year. We're gonna do that again in November, and the reason why we do this is we want to make sure that we welcome people in the community the right way, and we
Mhm.
can walk them through all the steps, because we offer that support. We offer the projections sheet. We have a retirement coach that will be able to run the projection sheet with you. So once you do it, you want to make sure, you want to double check. You want to make sure that you have not made any mistakes or anything. Well, we have people for you to do that. And we have a whole community where we help each other as well, talking about like how to transfer from RSP to RIF when it's the right time, tax optimization, talking about estate planning, and all the other topics around retirement. So if you do not want to go with a financial planner, you still have to plan for your retirement. If you do not plan, it's literally like walking blind in a jungle. I don't suggest that at all. So you want to have a clear plan, and you want to have it double check so you can transition into retirement. You know how much you're going to make at retirement, where the money is going to come from, and you know it will be optimized to pay at the least amount of taxes possible. Those are the things that we offer at Retirement Loop. So, and don't forget the Loopers show, which are super amazing because we have special guests. Sometimes it's actually people from their community. Some other times we have like financial planners and other professional that
Mhm.
comes on the show. And I love the case studies that we do, Mark and I. Mark is just an amazing guy to run those case studies. We cover like all kind of situations because everything is different. So you want to, if you think that your situation needs some special attention, well, we will be there to walk you through as well.
So again, the doors to Retirement Loop will reopen soon in November, so you don't want to miss the news and the freebies. To do so, join the waitlist now at retirementloop.ca/waitlist. Thank you, Mike, for sharing your insights about the crucial things to do to get prepared for retirement. For our show notes and related content, visit thedividendguideblog.com/251. Next week, we will see if it's possible to retire with 500K. So hit pause and the subscribe button now so you don't miss it. And until then, stay invested.
Stay invested. Hey, fellow investors, it's Mike here. I hope that you have enjoyed this episode. Please note that the Dividend Guide Blog podcast is at no time issuing buy or sell recommendation. Please do your own due diligence as this podcast is recorded for information and hopefully fun purposes only. Make your research, make sure you do your stuff. We're not responsible for your losses or your profit after listening to this episode. And until next one, stay invested.